Hello and welcome to Research Roundtable. My name is Annette Brown. I'm Principal Economist at FHI 360, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with my colleague, Emily Namey. She and her co-authors recently published a paper called How Does Mode of Qualitative Data Collection Affect Data and Cost? And these are findings from an experimental study. So in this paper, Emily and her co-authors are comparing in-person to online modes of data collection. And this is one of those great ideas that produced a really interesting paper, but that has suddenly become 100 times more relevant. So everyone is interested in these findings, including me. And so I hope you will enjoy this discussion with Emily today. Emily, why don't you start by telling us, since it wasn't as relevant when you started this study as it is now, what was your motivation to design this study?
Sure. So I think online qualitative research has been going on in the market research arena for 15, 20 years now. And in academia and applied research, we've been a little bit slower on the uptake. And we were very interested in exploring that space, but wanted to make sure that we had a good grounding and we knew what we might be trading off if we were to take this online and remote rather than doing it in person. And so, yes, like you said, we were not thinking of a pandemic when we started this research, but it has become very useful since then.
Yeah. So one great thing is that this is, as you said, it is a more rigorous way of addressing these questions. But another great thing is that you're not just comparing two things here, you're comparing a lot of things here. So tell the audience a little bit about the different comparisons that you're making.
Sure. So there had been about a dozen studies done before, starting like 2002 maybe through 2015. And most of them focused on focus groups, and most of them compared one in-person to one type of online qualitative mode. And so we designed an 8-arm quasi-experimental study where we looked at 4 different modes and 2 different methods. So we were looking at in-person interviews and focus groups. And so for each of those methods, we were also looking at online video like we're doing now. We looked at online synchronous texting or text-based, so where we are just typing back and forth to each other real time, and then online asynchronous text-based, where I post a question to a message board or in an email, and then the respondent has a chance to write back at their leisure.
Right. And, I feel like 4 months ago, people were not able to throw around the words synchronous and asynchronous like we are now. But it's great that you were able to make that comparison as well as the text and video and in-person comparison. You also had 2 ways of measuring the data that were collected. What were those?
Sure. So we wanted to know how might the data differ in person versus online. And so we looked at what lots of other people had measured was the volume of participant data. So how much were people engaged and how much data did you generate? And then we also, because we're more interested in meaning necessarily than the quantity of information, we looked at the thematic content. And we did that by creating thematic codes from the entire data set and then applying those across each of the individual transcripts to look at how many different themes we saw emerging out of each of the different modes of data collection.
Great. So what were the big aha findings?
I think the biggest one is that we didn't see a whole lot of difference in terms of the meaning of the data of what was generated. So in the word count and the volume of data, we did see statistically significant differences between the sort of audiovisual modes, so the in-person and the online video on one hand, and the text-based modes on the other. And I think we can chalk that up really to we can speak a lot faster than we can type. But in terms of the content, I think we found 85 themes across the whole data set. And in each of those modes of data collection, at least 85% or, at least 73 of those 85 themes were present. And so we're really not missing a whole lot in terms of identifying what are the key things within that range of responses.
Right. So those are really encouraging results. I know you, your colleagues, me, a lot of us are also conducting research in low and middle income countries. And your sample for this research was in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. But the research, the surveys we want to conduct in low and middle income countries, there's a lot of interest now in, can we go from a model where we fly overseas and we train surveyors and conduct a bunch of surveys in person to whether we can use these online methods. So what are you telling your colleagues when they're asking you, can we apply your encouraging findings to our settings?
Sure. So I think it really comes down to the technology, that both the access and the capabilities and skill. And so we had set as eligibility criteria for our study that people had to have access to the internet. We provided a webcam and that they had to have typing skills. And so I think that can be a big limiter of how this rolls out in other settings. And if people are doing this on their phones and typing with their thumbs, that the difference that we saw in the amount of data that participants provided, I think the difference would be even greater because it just takes a long time to say what you want to say when you're, text typing.
Right. So one aspect of this study that might not be obvious so far, but that I think is really interesting, is that you were actually the person doing all of these interviews and facilitating all of these focus groups. And you wrote a very interesting post for our blog talking about your personal experiences in these different data collection modes. Can you give us one or two highlights here today?
Sure. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was that I feel very experienced and skilled in creating rapport and connecting with participants in person and trying to develop protocols for doing that to make that connection with participants remotely. And so video one-on-one, this is pretty easy. I still have visual cues. I can still see how you're reacting to me. But when we take it to text-based where we can't see each other, that has potential benefits for, anonymity that maybe people are willing to say more. But I tried to do a video intro so they knew at least who they were sharing this information with. Mm-hmm. And in focus groups, I tried to have people create an avatar and introduce themselves. So again, I know where this data is going. I know a little bit more about who I'm talking with. And then trying to model the use of emojis and to give a way to put tone to the words when it was written text only.
Great. So you knew that I was going to come to this last question eventually because I'm an economist. And one of the great things about this study is that you also collected information about cost and you conducted a cost analysis as part of your results. So tell us what you found.
We found that online is not faster and cheaper, as I think some people tend to think. A big part of that is that because we are doing human subjects research, we need to make sure that the way that we're connecting with participants is safe and secure and private and confidential. And so we are paying to use secure platforms. Mm-hmm. And so when you add that platform fee on top of the regular data collection costs, it usually makes online a bit more expensive. And when we talk about online video, you still have to transcribe. And so you've got both the platform fee and the transcription cost. And so in all cases where we took travel out of the equation, the online methods were a bit more expensive than in person. If you add travel in there, then in person is more expensive.
Right, which is what we would expect. But I think that, as you said, people think we have all of these ways of communicating online for free. But we forget that if we're conducting human subjects research, we can't use all of those platforms. We need to pick specific platforms that allow us to do it in the right ways. Mm-hmm. Well, this is super interesting. Thank you so much. I want our viewers to know that Emily did write 2 posts for the RNE Search for Evidence blog. So please read her paper and read her posts on our blog and join us for other episodes of Research Roundtable. Thank you.